Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Just when you thought you were out, they pull you back in. This is becoming a melodrama between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Another plot twist. So there is not a form of legal action, but mediation has been triggered by Deontay Wilder and his team, who are seeking to make Tyson Fury take the third fight, which was in the original contract. As we know, Tyson Fury and his side came out recently and said, look, we're moving on. The contract, it's expired. We don't have any obligation to face you. And Fury is intending to fight on December the 5th in the UK. But Wilder and his co-manager Shelley Finkel and his team, they've been obviously trying to look at ways to resurrect this third fight. Deontay Wilder lost that second fight. He wants to have his revenge. He wants to try win his belt back in a third fight. So they have triggered mediation, which was in the contract. So trying to get this up and running, this third fight. So The Athletic, it has reported, so Mike Coppinger. So I'll go through what the story says here in brief, and then we'll get into a few thoughts. So the contract for Wilder Fury 2 included a rematch clause, and now Wilder's team has initiated the dispute resolution provision in an attempt to enforce the third fight that Top Rank and Fury contend is no longer legally obligated, sources tell The Athletic's Mike Coppinger. The first step is mediation, and that is expected to begin this week. The mediator, a retired judge, will receive the contracts and also preside over binding arbitration per the agreement for the February 22 title tilt that Fury won via 7th round stoppage. And Shelley Finkel, Deontay Wilder's co-manager, says we're going into it very optimistically this week. So it's another plot twist. Like I say, this has been some form of melodrama. I mean, you know, the sort of skeptic and the cynic in me would sort of look at this and go, is this all sort of been whipped up for some sort of frenzy to try and get interested in the third fight? Bearing in mind that Deontay Wilder was beaten soundly in the rematch, so leaving a lot of people a bit ho-hum on a third fight and like sort of umming and ahhing about whether they really wanted to see it. And if it is that sort of situation, and I'm not sure it is, it would have to be just the most, melodramatic and over-dramatized sort of situation that you can think of. Bearing in mind that we've had all sorts of claims being made by Deontay Wilder, including accusing his own trainer, Mark Breland, or former trainer, of spiking his water, accusing Tyson Fury of loading his gloves with an egg weight or shaped something. I mean, it really has gone, from one extreme to the other and gone from the bizarre to the ridiculous at times. And now we have another plot twist. Whether this is going to stack up and lead to anything, well, that's another question. The argument from the Fury side is, look, we've moved on because it's all over, nothing to see here. Deontay Wilder coming out and saying, look, honor this third fight, fight me, let's have this third fight, let's do it. Part of the reason it didn't happen in the time frame for the original contract was apparently the Wilder side kept pushing it back. So make of that what you will. Some people have been saying that may have been a deliberate tactic. And obviously Tyson Fury has sort of said, and this was well signaled, I'm not going to wait forever. And apparently he's not. So a December the 5th fight apparently in the offing, but less than a month away now. And you'd have to imagine, potentially knowing that the sort of action or something was going to happen, maybe they've held off finalizing, the December 5th opponent to sort of see where this goes. And getting back to some of the content from the Athletic article, so it's going to be looked at by a retired judge. So this is not in a courtroom or anything, but it'll be, along those sorts of lines in terms of this is going to be a binding decision. So the arbitration will be binding. So they're going to have to do whatever the judge ends up saying. So if he says, look, there is a case to answer here, there is going to be a third fight because my decision is da-da-da-da-da, whatever, there will be a third fight. So I'm no legal expert, but binding arbitration. So whatever is announced by the judge is what's going to have to be stuck to, is my read of the situation. And if that happens, well, maybe some people will have been jazzed up for a third fight and will look at this and go, okay, well, let's see Deontay Wilder beaten up again, or look, we can now see Deontay Wilder get his chance for redemption. It was going to be some sort of repeat or revenge sort of scenario if there was the third fight, so perhaps it will happen. But the judge may look at this and actually go, look, there is no sort of situation here. Top Rank and Tyson Fury, his Queensberry promoter Frank Warren, they are actually on solid ground here. And if that's the case, well, that ends up people just go their own separate ways. And I think given some of the ill will that's been online, there's been Deontay Wilder's hardcore, very hardcore supporters, going all around channels around YouTube and saying all manner of things and getting quite nasty and vicious at times. Very invested in Deontay Wilder, that's clear. And that's fine to be a hardcore supporter, but I think some of the comments that have been made elsewhere have been maybe beyond the pale at times and taking, the sort of conversation and direction in other ways that they shouldn't have been taken. But I think some of that comes down to just backing their guy to the hilt with some of his, what I will call, ridiculous comments that he's made publicly. I'm not on board with the stuff Deontay Wilder is saying, and it's not because I don't think he can fight, because he's a very dangerous fighter. But, what he is saying, for most people, and for most people, this is directed to the people who have drunk the Kool-Aid and just, believing every excuse under the sun. Most people do not believe that and think it's removed from reality. And you have to question, what is going on in Deontay Wilder's mind here. But he has been on some media in the United States, beyond social media channels, where he has been sort of doing a number of interviews in recent days. He was on with Brian Custard, and he was saying that if the Fury fight doesn't happen, he is still looking to fight, and soon, and it would be between, I think he said, the first week of January and also some point in February. So regardless of the Fury fight, he's going to be fighting soon. Whether that's going to be a very good opponent, that's unclear, because when you consider it's already November, so if he was to jump into a big fight, that person, the other opponent, would need some training camp time, right? Especially if it's going to be someone decent. But I guess with this whole sort of thing swirling around, no guarantees, of who it could be. Perhaps it could be Tyson Fury soon. I mean, we'll have to see what the retired judge comes back with, because his decision, from the binding arbitration, going to have some ramifications here for the heavyweight division. Perhaps the December the 5th date for Tyson Fury will have to be on ice. We just don't know. I mean, that's been talked about, but no opponent confirmed. Talk about Ajit Kabayel. And Tyson Fury has obviously been going on in recent days about Deontay Wilder, saying he thinks Wilder has lost his marbles. He said a number of things. He had that interview with Gareth A. Davies talking about the situation and that he would not ever give Deontay Wilder the third fight, given some of the stuff that he said. And that's understandable. But if it's forced upon him because of binding arbitration, well, that could be very interesting. And like I say, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do believe they have to stick to that binding arbitration. Otherwise, they could be subject to legal action. But I don't know what other legal avenues exist for either side, depending on the outcome. And I'm sure these are things that they're exploring at the moment. And I guess you have to ask the question, do you want to see this third fight? All this, back and forth, the brouhaha, the, Deontay Wilder, the ridiculous excuses, the stuff about Mark Breland accusing him of spiking his water and all that sort of stuff. Does that make you want to see a third fight? Does it? Does it really? I mean, for me, I'm just like, oh man, this is getting boring now, just deal with the loss. I mean, if Wilder had have just dealt with the loss and moved on and said he was going to commit himself, dedicate himself to the sport, instead of, coming up with everything under the sun except for his own performance, I think people could have just sort of got on and, got on board and sort of said, I'm interested to see him fight again, see how he does bounce back. But it really has sort of lurched from one extreme to the other. And Shelley Finkel wasn't prepared to talk about it in any length or depth when he has been asked about it. But obviously this mediation, he is. So he says that they're very optimistic. So we'll see where this goes. But it's a melodrama. So we had the first act, which was Tyson Fury saying he was walking away, then Deontay Wilder heading back eventually, looking like a jilted lover. And now we have another plot twist. So it goes on. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.